Hey guys, my name is Shane and today we're going to be doing a walkthrough tour of the Gabriella Plants greenhouse. Welcome, my name is Shane Maloy. I'm the third generation owner and operator of this same greenhouse that's been in the family for 3 generations here on Gabriella Lane. We call it Gabriella Plants now, but a little bit of the family history. My grandpa first moved here in the 1970s. My dad was in pre-K at the time to figure out how he could start a new life for his family, and he wanted to start a garden center. So he bought a piece of property in 1970 before Disney was started in Winter Park, and he built a garden center on that property, which he called the backyard. If you're local to Orlando, that property is now known as Towns Garden Center. When he retired, he sold it to Mr. Towns, who turned it into Towns Garden Center. But he started it as the backyard. He sold absolutely everything you could need for the backyard, not just the plants, but also the patio furniture, the gas grills, the tiki torches, anything he could possibly do to get you to stop on the way home one more time at his shop and talk to him a little bit longer. He was way more of an extrovert. If he was leading this greenhouse tour today, it would be, roughly speaking, 2.5 hours long, because he'd have story after story of his career and also how he wanted to serve you as a customer. And my dad grew up working at that garden center throughout high school, and eventually they bought this piece of property in 1976. When they bought this piece of property, it had nothing on it other than a small tack shed. The property used to be owned by the Dodd family and used for cattle farms. And my grandparents bought this particular property to begin growing an operation to grow plants at the time for Grandpa's garden center. My dad grew up working in the garden center all throughout high school and also while he was in college on summers. But my dad eventually realized that his passion really lied in the plants more than the people, which I can completely relate to. So he went to the University of Florida for a degree in agriculture and came back to Central Florida and eventually worked out a deal to buy the same piece of property we're now walking through today. I grew up on the property all the way back from the point that I was 2 years old. So all my gas money and everything else came from working in the same greenhouse. And it's definitely evolved over time. When I was a very small child, this greenhouse was half the size it was. My dad spent about 25 years building this greenhouse to be about 1 acre in size overall. What Dad started was a completely different business. It operated in the 90s off this crazy thing called a fax machine, which sent a photo through a phone line. Crazy. And we also had this crazy thing called a landline phone, which hung right above the camera today, and it had one of those crazy like 50-foot cords with the coily cables that as soon as you uncoiled it, it never quite coiled back. And of course the phone would only ring when you were all the way at the other side of the greenhouse, so you got your steps in even before your Apple Watch could tell you how many steps you were doing every day. So I grew up with that style of business. All the packing slips and all the paperwork was on those crazy carbon copies. It was a crazy different business model. And when my dad sought elected office in 2016, and it was only after he won as the oldest of 3 children that I was kind of voluntold to take over the family business and begin to sell through the spring crops. What ended up happening was I didn't stop planting more and more plants. The whole point of the wholesale model was to grow a dozen different species, but to have mass quantities. It wasn't until a particular phone call from one of our brokers that I was made aware of one of the plants we were growing, Philodendron Pink Princess, which we'll discuss in this tour, was rising in popularity. This was late 2017, early 2018. And finally, after that SKU, which we had been growing for a very, very long time, finally raised in popularity to the point that we were selling out of Philodendron Pink Princess for the first time. One broker finally told me, "You know why you're selling out?" And I asked her why, and she said, well, because people are selling individual cuttings, like top cuts of Philodendron Pink Princess online for $100 a cutting. And this was in the fall of 2018. So upon hearing that, it was mind-blowing for 2 reasons though. One, obviously the price difference, because we were selling at the time 6-inch pots with 5 rooted cuttings that had been easily 9 months old, and we were selling them for $6.50 at the time. So that kind of blew my mind on the price aspect, but the bigger thing that blew my mind was there's plants online. I'm a millennial techie kid. I grew up designing websites for other people, shooting video and doing other things in the creative space, loving technology, and I had never really considered plants plus technology. So at that night, at the time, my wife was working at Chick-fil-A closing shift, so I had until 11 p.m. or later. I created this same logo in Photoshop in 30 minutes or so, and created an Etsy store and launched the first 10 pink princesses, those same 6-inch pot, 5 rooted cuttings, for $50 a piece at the time. I woke up the next morning, all 10 had sold, and I had the dawning realization I had no idea how to ship them safely through the mail whatsoever. So needless to say, those first 10, rest in peace, did not exactly suffer the greatest fate, but we eventually figured out a way to ship plants through the mail safely all throughout the country. We've shipped to all 50 states every single year since Gabriella Plant's inception. In fact, we've shipped over 750,000 plants through the mail in the last 6.5 years, and I'm so proud of the team that's made that happen. Today, we really want to take you through the greenhouse, talk a little bit more about not just the family story, but how we do our jobs here at Gabriella Plants, and I can't wait for you to come with me. So, as I mentioned, my grandparents first bought the property in 1976, and my dad grew up on the property from about 6th grade onwards. When my grandparents finally decided to transition the family business to my dad in the 1990s, I actually grew up in the same house, which you will see on screen right now, as my dad had grown up as a kid as well, which is a cool, really cool 3rd generation story. But when my dad first started to do commercial wholesale, growing up plants, my grandpa built him these first 2 greenhouses, which we're standing in right now. And in case you aren't familiar, you could look at this as one giant greenhouse, but it's actually 13 different greenhouses in series and was built over 5 different build stages over my dad's 24-year career building the different greenhouses and operating the wholesale business. In the past 6.5 years, we've grown around 1,700 different SKUs, or offered 1,700 different SKUs. We've grown about 1,100 of those in our greenhouses. Right now, we have about 650 different SKUs or species growing in the greenhouse. So our goal going to direct to consumer from our greenhouse to your house has shifted the business from being wholesale, where you were trying to grow a limited number of SKUs at a big quantity, to now offering the widest selection possible. And I can't be more proud of our team that makes that happen every single week. These first 2 greenhouses we use as inventory because we prefer, instead of our shipping team, which ships out of the same location here on the property, having to go to every single bench and find one of this and one of that to ship your order. Instead, every single week, our team will go through the entire greenhouse, pick out the very best of the best. We will bring them up into these first 2 greenhouses to be photographed, to be listed online, and then eventually when you place your order, the shipping team only has to go into these first 2 greenhouses to find the plant that they need and then take it into shipping to be shipped to your location. After my grandparents sold this property to my parents at the time in the 90s, they ended up buying a piece of property that's only 5 driveways away, 1 stop sign away down the road on Brooks Lane. When my grandparents passed away in 2019 and 2020, it was mid-2020 when my wife and I, Miriam and I, were able to buy my grandparents' piece of property. And since then, in 2021, we've actually built greenhouses in that backyard, so we also bring some inventory from that location over here into these first 2 greenhouses as well. If you want more information, I'm sure you can find the link in one of the corners here of some of the lessons we've learned from building greenhouses in our backyard, but we'll continue with the greenhouse tour. So obviously the first two greenhouses are inventory, but as we started to transition into the digital age, my immediate question beyond the Etsy store was how much more of this greenhouse can I actually turn electronic? Again, being a millennial techie kid, and one of my worst pet peeves was having to come here every single weekend because plants don't take the day off, Saturday, Sunday. I'd have to come over here and hand crank each and every curtain on the exterior to make sure that the plants were vented, because in the summertime we can average 10 degrees warmer than the outside temperature. So if you see the outside temperature in Orlando is 97, it's probably 107 degrees in here. So it's very important that we roll up each side. And that's part of when we started to make every single part of the greenhouse completely remote controllable from a phone anywhere in the world. So we can open an app on our phones, go to a particular curtain, like the side curtain here, and we can begin to roll down. They're currently up, and we can roll down that curtain, and they will begin to roll down on that far side over there. That just makes our jobs easier as growers. And in my opinion, the more time we can spend caring for the plants rather than caring for the actual structure of the greenhouse, that's a way better experience, not only for our team, but also for the plants. Additionally, beyond that, we started to go and say, how can we water these plants on the weekends without having to come in? Because in the past, the process of watering every single plant was going to every single bench, pulling a manual valve, and waiting the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long that particular bench needed to run, and then turn that off and go to the next bench and the next bench. And in total here, we have about 87 benches in total on this greenhouse space. And that would take a combined about 6 hours just to water every single plant in the greenhouse. That's a full-time job, especially in the greenhouse where you have to water every single day. Now we have every single plant, both in the sky and on the benches, able to be watered from an app remotely anywhere. In fact, we can water a bench back there just by saying that we want to run L9 for 5 seconds and hit go, and that bench will begin to water itself. And that's great for two reasons. One, obviously, we're able to do that on the weekends, which is amazing. The other thing is that logs every single time we ever water those benches. During the summer, especially when we're doing it day to day, we'll have all these waters preemptively just water themselves a couple minutes each day. And then if they need more, we can always do that manually as well. I did say that the Etsy store, though, started with the story of Pink Princess. Pink Princess has a special spot in our heart. The story goes that we never actually intended on growing Pink Princess. And at the time, my dad was a wholesale customer of this particular nursery. And she had called my dad and asked, would we be interested in any of the kind of rarer plants she was growing at the time. And one of them were Pink Princess. And she kind of gave my dad the heads up that sometimes they produce good variegations, sometimes they don't. She had only grown them from cuttings, just like we have only ever grown them from cuttings. And the plants on this particular bench with the hangers are actually the original plants my dad bought and still use to this day to plant every single Pink Princess that we grow here at Gabriella Plants. So kind of cool story, and we love, every plant has a story here at Gabriella Plants, and we love incorporating the backstory to plants as much as possible. So I mentioned that my dad's business was a commercial wholesale business, and obviously both for ourselves, but more so for the wholesale, being efficient in space is a huge part of the business. So all these initial greenhouses that my dad built actually all roll. So you only have one working aisle per greenhouse per side, but what that ends up giving you is half a bench of extra real estate per side of the greenhouse per greenhouse in all the first 6 greenhouses, which if you are growing 4-inch plants is roughly speaking 4,500 more plants you can fit just in these couple of greenhouses because you have the rolling benches. Now the funny story is, and right now we're in the springtime, obviously crops are a little bit shorter than they are in the summer. But the fun story is always when you start to roll over a bench in the middle of summer and somebody yells, "Oh no!" and you have to realize that somebody had been working in the smaller row. So it doesn't come without its consequences for that sake, but it's a way for us to fit more plants in every single greenhouse here. Again, we only have about an acre, so the more plants we can fit in here, especially in the winter time, we're coming out of winter, we spend a lot of money just to make sure, because these are all tropical plants, they're used to 55 degrees and up. So we spend a lot of money on propane to make sure that these plants keep their tropical environment. So the more plants we can fit in every single greenhouse and every inch of square feet footage in the entire greenhouse is definitely part of our operations here every single week. So I do have to say, just in passing, one of the things we're most proudest of in 2023, 2024, and obviously going into 2025, we have way beyond extended our growing of Hoyas. So we went from just offering 17 different species of Hoya specifically. We have over 100 in production right now. You see some of them here. But when we go about growing what we grow here at Gabriella Plants, most of what we grow is actually from cuttings. So all the baskets you see in the sky, those are all watered by individual drippers. And our goal here is everything we grow from cuttings is self-sufficient, because the more you bring in cuttings from overseas, the more you introduce new pests, new diseases, things that you wouldn't otherwise encounter in your greenhouse. So most of what we grow here, about 70% of what we grow, is from cuttings, and for that matter, from self-reliant cuttings. So we grow our own baskets, not that they're in the size and configuration we could ever ship online, but we're able to bring those baskets down and chop them and then plant from cuttings directly into soil. We do all of our propagation directly into soil here in our middle greenhouse. Fun fact, the two greenhouses used to be separated. You may even see that the concrete kind of shifts here between the first greenhouse and the second greenhouse. When my dad first built these were two separate greenhouses, which he did to keep them at two different temperatures at the time. He grew mainly Boston ferns in the back and tropical plants in the front. Ferns can be tropical, but they can handle much lower temperatures than the other plants he were growing in the greenhouse. And then eventually, when I was a small kid, he built the middle greenhouse here, which we call Greenhouse 6, or the soil bay in the old days, where it was all now one continuous concrete aisle. So, fun little editor note here as I'm editing the video. Not only were the greenhouses two separate greenhouses, the main reason why he built the second greenhouses separate was to reorient the direction of the greenhouses, because if he had continued on the same orientation as Grandpa had set up in the first two, it actually would have eventually intersected with the property line itself. So if you look on the screen right now, there's a weird little section when he combined the two that he had to figure out how exactly to tie the two together, since they don't exactly match up on the property line and in series. So just a fun little edit. Continuous concrete aisle, which is great for 6th grade Shane, because I could drive my Razor scooter all the way from front to back, and it was a lot better than having to run back and forth to see Dad. So we use this middle greenhouse mainly to do all of our planting. We have soil. We do use just soil that is already pre-bagged on the far side there. Most commercial greenhouses, especially the very, very big guys, will use soil that's delivered in dump trucks versus bagged soil, because it's far cheaper, but that introduced a whole nother level of pests and also what weed seeds happen outside. So we decided that bagged soil was better for us. And depending on the type of plant we're planting, we'll mix in whether it's extra bark or extra perlite. We'll make those mixes by hand over here in the soil bay. And everything that gets propagated normally happens in this middle greenhouse here at Greenhouse 6, and before they get their story stake, and then eventually put on their planting bench to grow out before they sell to you. I mentioned that about 70% of what we grow is from cuttings, but there are a handful of SKUs that we actually grow from tissue culture. This is Philodendron Moonlight, one of the plants we grow from tissue culture. I won't pretend to know exactly how tissue culture works, but in a very short form, what's able to happen is a plant is able to be put into tissue culture, which happens in a lab environment. They're able to take an undifferentiated cell, put it into a petri dish, make it multiply itself, and then eventually give it a different set of chemicals that eventually makes those multiplications eventually grow into full-blown plants. And the cool thing about that is you're able to bring a plant that wouldn't otherwise make it to market in a huge scale. You can put one specimen into TC and 18 months later have 100,000 of those exact same plants. They're clones of each other, which is super, super cool to be able to bring things. But TC especially serves the market of things that otherwise wouldn't be able to be grown from cuttings. Things like alocasias, where you would have to wait for the corms to separate subsurface and then eventually rip apart the different corms of the plant. Those plants are able to be put into the process of TC and then provided to us as growers for us to grow out into sellable size. We do grow a handful of species from seed. Some of those are ant plants, which is my personal favorite plant. If you've never seen them, I'm sure I'll have some B-roll here. Just a super cool plant. And they're not even symbiotic, they're actual mutualistic, meaning the plant doesn't necessarily need the ant and the ants don't necessarily need the plant. They just so happen to exist in the same space where they're able to, the ant runs across the ant plant and goes, oh my God, it's a 5-star hotel. Great, I'll stay here for the night. And it ends up benefiting both the ants and the plant. So it's a great species. Also on top of that's one of the things we grow from seed. We also grow tons of different unique hybrids like Anthurium hybrids and Philodendron hybrids. We even have a handful of Sansevieria hybrids that we've been working on, primarily in the other location we call Brooks. But Anthurium hybrids are kind of funny because they work just like human children, where you can spend all that time putting together the pollen and the parent plant together, and you think you're going to come out with this really cool cross that's the two of you combined, and mom spends all that time making the plant happen. You can wait up to 6 months to even start to germinate seeds. It can take 18 months before you even start to see leaf development of some of your Anthurium hybrids, and then lo and behold, the whole process, it just comes out looking like dad, even though mom did all the work. So it works just like kids can work at times. But we do have Anthurium hybrids and Philodendron hybrids that are unique to us here, as well as several cultivars like Philodendron Rio, Philodendron Gabi, which are unique to us, Pothos alta, that's also an original to us. So we love being able to pick out the things that are unique and be able to offer you guys something unique in return. So coming back in the back greenhouses, which we used to call the fern greenhouses, because back here, when I took over the business, there were none of these benches that existed. My dad grew thousands and thousands of Boston fern hanging baskets, so much so he would have them double stacked in every greenhouse. And when you had the smaller ones up top and the larger ones on the bottom, you basically had no light to actually grow a plant beneath it. So over the years, we've certainly added benches back here and expanded how many SKUs we can offer you guys. But one of my favorite plants that we grow, or a genus of plants or category of plants we grow, are definitely carnivorous plants. If you've ever killed a Venus flytrap, it's mainly because they're sold to you wrong. The biggest thing about Venus flytraps, and for that matter, carnivorous plants in general, are they're native to bogs. They're used to swamps. They want to be constant. They want to have constant access to moisture, which of course we at Gabriella Plants accomplish with these finest of Rubbermaid bins we got from Walmart for $8.99. If you need an extra lid, I have a whole stack of them in the back. I'd be happy to give you a spare lid. But we grow over 17 different species, not just Venus flytraps, but lots of really cool things like sundews, which have this really cool tiny little sticky pads that happen every single leaf of the plant that will trap the insects. It's just a cool little species, but the biggest thing is carnivorous plants you generally kill because they tell you to put them on their windowsill and they give you that little thing with the lid on it. And that's not how you keep care of carnivorous plants. Most all of them want to be in this constant access to moisture, which again we do with these great Walmart Rubbermaid bins of all things. So it's just one of my favorite things to highlight because I don't think I personally have killed a million different Venus flytraps in my life. So it was really cool to see our previous head grower Brett finally teach our team how exactly these are intended to grow, and we try to do that the best we can and make sure they're plenty moist to survive the shipment to you through the mail. So I mentioned that technology is huge here at Gabriella Plants. One of the things I do want to point out, and you guys may know about it or not, but was a crazy pipe dream I had in the early days of Gabriella Plants. We call them the story stakes. If you get any plants here that we grow in our greenhouse ourselves, obviously some of our inventory is bought in from other family nurseries in the Orlando metro area because Apopka used to be the foliage capital of the world. So there's a lot of mom and pop nurseries in Apopka that we like to support, especially if they're growing something we're not growing. So we can offer the widest variety possible, but anything we grow ourselves will have one of these story stakes. And if you scan it with your phone, the QR code, every single plant we've grown ourselves has an individualized QR code that will tell you not only the person on our team who planted the plant, but also the plant's birthday, the exact date that we planted that plant, as well as care information and the soil mix, tons of different information. So if you grab a plant from us that has a story stake, and on our website it'll indicate if we have a story stake for it or not. If you get a plant with a story stake, make sure to scan it because we believe every plant has a story, and the more story we can share with you is such a benefit not only to you, but also celebrates our team. One of the things I talk about a lot is from day one, our shipping team had what we call a packed by card. So every single package we've ever shipped in shipping has been signed on the packed by card that with a Sharpie that, you know, Sarah or Juliana or somebody else has packed your order, and that just adds the personal touch to what we try to provide to you, our customers. And in the same way, especially for the greenhouse team, I mentioned it can be 107 degrees in here. It can be very, very hot, and especially with planting plants, you're planting something that's not actually going to make it to you guys, our customer, for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months maybe. So it's really cool to be able to give the growers that planted these plants credit when you finally get it. In the summertime, you're doing your day. I equate it to being a runner. Once you get going on your marathon, you know, after those first couple miles, you're just doing it kind of mindlessly, and that can be for the greenhouse team. Like you're just planting, filling more pots, planting more plants. So as much as possible, we love celebrating every plant story, and we love sharing those with you via our story stakes. I can't take credit for the amazing work that you've seen here in the greenhouse. We have an amazing team of 17 different people who have worked very, very hard in and out every single week to make sure that we're growing the best plants possible and shipping them to you safely. So if you want to support us, you can go to GabriellaPlants.com. I can't thank you guys enough for coming to this greenhouse tour and watching this online. As a third generation owner operator in my family, it's so cool that my wife and I were able to bring in the fourth generation to our family, little Asher Garrick here. From experience, it's more watering the concrete the first 2 years, but eventually we hope he falls in love with plants as much as we have. And we thank you guys so much for watching this video.